All right, Hunter. Well, what do you think? You feel like you're ready to rock?
Let's
warmed up, loosened up,
going here. Yeah,
right.
let's do it.
All right, let's rock and roll.
You wanna kick things off here? Introduce yourself.
Sure. This is like for those that don't know me, I'm not sure if my name's in there or not in terms of my username information and whatnot. My name's Aiden Charles, the head coach or owner of CCNS, and I've been coaching for like 15 years straight now, actually, full time. And of course, happy to. We've just gotten into Zwift quite a bit in the past couple of years. It's really come out probably been out for 5 or 6 years, believe it or not. But it's obviously really taken hold, especially during today's times. So we're excited to get you guys going and give you guys the once over with all this stuff. I'd have to say that during the winter, we probably spend 30% of our time entertaining technical issues, exactly like the stuff that we're going to go over today, just getting people connected to Zwift, using their power meters and all these sorts of things. So you guys aren't alone. A lot of these questions are totally normal, and there's nothing wrong with you. It can be super confusing at first. So Hunter, care to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so Hunter Pronovo. I've been coaching full-time with CCNS for 6 years and change. Same basic experience with Zwift. Been using it for a couple of winters now, but definitely quite a bit over the last 6-7 months or so. So it's been great, and I think we as coaches we've used it enough, and like Aiden said, we have to have a certain level of experience with it now, but we've used it enough to be able to come up with the main points, right? And we know what athletes out there are oftentimes having issues with. So it was about time that we got together and put together these clinics. So, and you'll have to. Aiden's going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. He's got some questions he's going to throw at me. This is going to be a back and forth between he and I, but please, like Aiden said earlier, type those questions out in the chat window. It'll definitely help bring to mind points that we want to bring out, and if we don't bring out points and answers to your questions during the 30 or 40 minutes or so of the clinic here, then we definitely have some time afterward. We're going to try to address all the questions that you might have in detail. So
yeah, absolutely. And fire away during it. Well, we also have Vivian and Ben on the line. They have experience with Zwift as well. So they'll be able to field some questions and at least entertain you guys while you're in here as well. So absolutely fire away in the chat box too. Maybe some of the questions might not necessarily need to be addressed in the group, but we'll also be going back and forth in the chat box independently. So I'll do my best.
Okay, great. So you should see slide 2 here of the PowerPoint, right, Aiden?
Yep.
Great. So I included this graphic here, and this is something we've used in other clinics, and it's a great representation of kind of the progression of an athlete's goals. And as you can see, we all kind of start, no matter whether we're starting out in just riding in general, or even if we've just upgraded to Category 1, we kind of start at that bottom of the pyramid. We want to be able to finish that group ride without crashing. We want to be able to finish that Category 1 race if that's where we are without getting dropped. So it's just the basic skills, and then we go up from there. We find our place in the community. We start to get competitive, and then we want to seek mastery over that field of endeavor. And it's applicable here because as we're getting started with Zwift, you have to kind of take care of this first step. You have to be competent with the platform before you can even start to think about, I want to be winning a race, or I want to be upgrading into the next category, or where do I fit in the community? So this is where this clinic is coming in. We want to make sure that everybody is as competent as possible with Zwift before moving on to that next step, because it really speaks to the way goals should be set up for an athlete.
Exactly.
So just a couple of assumptions here, and just as like for the high level overview of the clinic here. We're going to assume that everybody has got the companion app installed on their phone. We're going to assume that everybody is using a full-fledged Zwift account and not the trial period. There are a couple limitations with the trial period. I have heard some people get frustrated with Zwift. They don't think it's working correctly, but meanwhile they're on the last day of their trial period. So just be aware of that. And then the third point here, some experience with the Zwift display, because we're not going to spend time talking about all of these things that we see on the Zwift display. So just although actually,
yeah, I mean, we can go over some of it. By the way, in the general Q&A section, frankly, we expect a lot of these. We're going to get through a lot of basic information. And then what we want to do is sort of open it up to answer any technical questions that specific people have. So like in the second half of this, if you guys have questions about the display or your specific technical issue, we're absolutely happy to go over that. But we're going to rip through a lot of information, and maybe it'll generate some questions more than even answers, but that's okay. Like that's in the second half of this hour, we definitely want to get into that. So bear with us, and we can get into anything you guys want during this. But we'll go through some initial stuff. Absolutely write your questions as we go, and we'll get there for sure. Yep.
Yeah, so I just see that question from the Rocklands talking about group rides. Great question. We'll definitely get through all of those questions for sure. Let's see. Okay, so next slide. Moving on here. All right, so we've probably all felt, if you have any kind of experience with Zwift, you've probably felt this way. Doesn't even necessarily need to be Zwift. Sometimes electronics in general can sometimes seem like a steep learning curve. So that's why I put that fun GIF in there. But I just wanted to quickly go through the three main ways that people connect to Zwift and use the equipment and the gadgets around Zwift. And honestly, we'd love to hear what you guys are, how you guys are connecting, and because that might spur further conversation. And then I'm going to show you Zwiftalizer, which is a great tool for troubleshooting connection issues. So I'm actually going to skip ahead to this diagram, which is going to show you the three main ways that people connect to Zwift. And just really quickly, I'll quickly run through this. I won't get into it in too much detail. But you've got up here at the top, connecting to a trainer via a laptop or a PC tower, big old tower computer that's not very portable. You've got your smart trainer. It's connected through an ANT+ signal, Bluetooth, to the computer. The Zwift game is running on that computer, and then you're connected to the TV. And then going on further, that you can use an iPhone or an iPad connected to an Apple AirPlay, or to the TV. And then you've also got the option of using the companion app along with the Apple TV, and then a TV to use to get connected to Zwift. I personally, my personal setup is this one up here. I use my laptop to run the Zwift game. I've got an HDMI cable to a TV that's right in front of me. It's a great, usually trouble-free setup, because, and this is one of the main things we wanted to bring out with this. If you've got a choice to use,
which one would you say is the best, and why in some way? I mean, there's no probably all of them do the job, but is there one that's particularly better than the other for any given reason?
Yes,
Which
and
one would you recommend?
It's the top one here. It's the top one here because you can rely more heavily on an ANT Plus signal, which tends to be more stable than a Bluetooth signal, especially if you're running Windows and Windows 10. Bluetooth support is oftentimes very suspect. So I personally have my smart trainer talking to my laptop in the Zwift game through an ANT Plus signal, and the same thing with the power meter on my bike. It's using ANT Plus to talk to Zwift. How about you, Aidan?
Do you need anything to communicate with ANT Plus? Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not here on this diagram, but if you can follow my mouse, I've got an extension cable that plugs into one of the USB ports in the laptop, and that extension cable just simply allows me to plug in the ANT Plus receiver, the dongle, farther away from the laptop where it's a little bit more free of interference, but more importantly, so that it can be closer to my bike, to my power meter on my bike, and the trainer. It literally rests right underneath my bike. It's about a 3 or 4 foot cable, which is an important detail. Sometimes you can buy.
Sorry, and I'm gonna post this up actually in the chat box there. I'm posting up a link to which I definitely recommend to the ANT Plus stick or dongle, as they say, and it's a bundle of the ANT Plus stick and the USB extension cord. You can go right there and Amazon Prime that bad boy now.
Yep.
And it's really just like it's a little like antenna thing, but like the closer you can get it to your power meter or your trainer, the better. So that's why people use pretty long USB extension cables to get that little antenna thing as close as they can to their power meter or the trainer so that they can pick up the signal as consistently as possible.
Yep. So, yeah, and the other, as you can see, I mean, it just kind of looks more simple. It looks more concise. Like you've only got really two stops along the way. And actually, if you consider this a cable, and this is a hardwired cable, so you're not going to get any interference or any kind of signal drop there. So it's really just about getting the signal to your laptop, and you're good. Obviously, as you can see with all of these other ways of connecting, you've got a lot more wireless connections that could pick up interference, and a lot of times they do, which is something that oftentimes leads to frustration. So
yeah, and amongst the hardcore Zwifting community, and generally the ANT Plus stick, this recommendation at the top is the way to go. Not Bluetooth, but specifically ANT Plus. So I definitely would recommend that as your top option if you can.
Yep. And so let's see. I'm going to go back. So please, if you guys right off the top of your head know that you're using 1, 2, or 3 there, type it in there, because really
and let us know. We're happy to help. We're curious in the sense that we don't want to go into things that aren't applicable to most of the people here. But if there is if you guys are having connection issues or drops, absolutely let us know.
Yep.
So Karen's using Apple TV, which is good. What about other folks here? Noah, Sean, Gary. Maybe they haven't figured out the chat box yet.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So now you're looking at my browser window now, Aidan?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right. So I just want to show you guys a really neat tool here. It's Zwiftalizer.com. And what we're going to do here is we're going to use Zwiftalizer to kind of get an idea of if there's actually problems with our signal going to Zwift. So every time you use Zwift, a log is written with any kind of issues and some specs about how it went, and Zwiftalizer kind of makes heads or tails of that. So I just quickly wanted to show you how to use this, because it's a kind of a cool tool. So obviously the browser window's right here, and it's pretty simple to get to your log. All you have to do is on your laptop search Zwift /log. And everything pops up here. I'm going to right-click on just logs here, and then I'm going to go to Explore.
For some reason, we can't see that window.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just sharing the browser window. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Well, here.
So you're going to.
Maybe I can share. How's that? Now you're seeing my entire screen?
I think so. Try it. Yep, definitely. Better.
Okay. So I'm going to do that again. Zwift /log. I'm going to go over to this logs right here. You can see it's a folder. I'm going to right-click on that to open that up to explore. That window is opening up on my other screen here, but I'm just going to kind of drag it over so you can kind of see it. I'm going to open that up, and the one on the top here is the one we're looking for, and I'm just going to simply drag it into the OpenZwiftalizer.com box. And of course, did it work? Did it work? Oh, great. Maybe. I guess it's not working. Maybe because maybe there's some kind of weird thing going on with. Try one more time. Okay, it's not going to work. All right. So what would have popped up here is it would have given me a bunch of specs on my computer. It would have given me some. It would have given me my frame refresh rate. It would have told me how many signal drops there were. It would have actually given me recommendations on how to fix those signal drops. And it's actually just a really good tool to keep in mind. So make sure you mark that down.
Zwift, yeah, exactly. Like it is when people really are having issues and they can't figure out, hey, is it my AMP Plus connection? Is it my Wi-Fi? Is it like all these different things? Like this is going to tell you all that stuff. Like so, whenever you have signal drops or if you're having connections like drop in and out for no good reason, even though you have that AMP Plus stick and you've turned off all your other Bluetooth stuff, whatever it might be, this is going to tell you what's going on. So absolutely is a must-do for troubleshooting. Yep.
Just one quick word of advice. Every time I've used that as the Zwiftalizer tool, it's told me that I experience a large number of signal drops. But meanwhile, when I use Zwift, there's no issues whatsoever on my end, like using Zwift. So if you happen to get that, don't freak out. Don't say, oh my goodness, I need to fix something. If Zwift is running correctly, then you're good. But just for whatever reason, it gives me that reason. I think I probably am on the, just over a certain threshold where it triggers that warning. But meanwhile, when I use Zwift, I'm totally fine. So just bear that in mind. I've heard a couple people experience that where they use that tool and they see that Zwiftalizer is telling them they're getting a few signal drops, but they don't even see them. So. All right, so Aiden, we're back to the PowerPoint. You're
Yep.
looking at that, right? Yep. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So, one quick thing I wanted to go over is using the trainer or the power meter on the bike for the power source. So, Aiden, what do you use when you're connecting to Zwift? Do you use for your power source the trainer? The smart trainer?
Do you have a screenshot of that to show people by any chance or no? Like in sense of what that looks like?
I do. So now you're looking at Zwift?
Yeah. Great. Yeah.
So
to be clear, like if you notice, just to be crystal clear about what we're talking about, you can, when you connect to Zwift, right, like when you first fire it up and log in, this is going to pop up. And you're going to see your all these things will connect usually automatically based off of memory, what's like connected before. And if you have a smart trainer, you'll see that pop up under your controllable trainer, right? If you don't have a smart trainer, then that won't pop up, or like you'll see it'll turn blue. But under the power source, usually if you're using your smart trainer as like your source for like dictating how much power you're putting out, aka if I'm using a Wahoo Kicker and I'm using the Wahoo Kicker as my power meter, those two things are going to read the same, right? It's going to be both your controllable trainer and your power source. But you can, like if you're neurotic like me and you have two power meters on your bike and a smart trainer, you can actually choose which power meter you want to use as like the power source and leave the Kicker or the smart trainer as the controllable trainer that actually dictates the resistance. This is really important for people. What we highly recommend is that you use whatever power meter you use out on the road as your power source and leave the Kicker as a control, or like whatever smart trainer that you have as a controllable trainer, okay? It's really important because there are discrepancies between power meters, and sometimes people go months not knowing that there's a 10-watt discrepancy even, and that can drive people bonkers. Just trust us. Long explanation, but save yourself the mental rabbit hole that you roll down as you try to figure that out. In hindsight, just use your regular power meter as your power source. That would require you to have an AMP Plus stick to pick up the power meter data, but that's why we recommend using that AMP Plus connection method in the first place. So, and to answer your question, Hunter, I use my pedals as my power source, and I use my Wahoo Kicker as my controllable trainer.
Right. Yep. And well, yeah, the smart trainer is going to be the only option here because obviously the power meter on your bike can't control any resistance. Aiden, you mentioned there's discrepancy between multiple power meters, which is true, but there can also be discrepancies between the power meter that the smart trainer has in it and the power meter on your bike. So again, this is why.
That's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for consistency's sake, the power meter that you're using outside is the one you want to be using indoors. So I'm going to go back to.
Always want to make sure you know how to calibrate both your trainer and your power meter separately. That's important. And always make sure you calibrate it like before you start each ride, because temperature variations and things like that make a big difference, and it'll help you a lot.
Yep. So once again, the top option, we went over some of this, but that top option is really the gold standard. And please, I was talking to a junior rider the other day, and he's been using Zwift for this entire winter, and I thought he at least had an iPad, but turns out he's been using it this entire time, watching it on his iPhone, and it blew me away. Not because it was like, oh my goodness, how can you watch Zwift on such a small screen, but because this junior he was really into. He's a pretty good Zwift racer. He uses it a lot. It motivates him, and he enjoys it. But meanwhile, he's been using it on his iPhone, and I couldn't I had to take a moment because I was like, oh my goodness, if you enjoy Zwift so much on your iPhone, or if somebody else enjoys it so much on their iPad, oh my goodness, you get a good TV and you set it up in front of you. It is truly a game changer. So if you're going to do it right, and get the TV, get the full setup, and even just a laptop screen is pretty good if it's directly in front of you, but nothing beats a TV 3-4 feet away, which is how I've got it set up and how Aiden's got it set up as well. All right, so let's talk about a couple different things about how Zwift kind of comes at us here, and how we use Zwift, and so how we can use Zwift better. So drafting, and then trainer difficulty, and then we're going to talk a little bit about erg mode, and when to use erg mode, and when perhaps not to use erg mode. So yes, we get this question a lot. Is there drafting in Zwift? And the answer is absolutely. There is drafting in Zwift. It's just that you don't feel it like you feel it outside. Outside, you can be in the draft, 10 feet away from somebody. You can be in the draft on the side of somebody. You can be in a group, and you can be moving around in that group, and you're getting the benefits of the draft all that time. And with Zwift, it's totally different. It's not quite like that. Outside, it's a lot of shades of gray. With Zwift, it tends to be more black and white. So, Aiden, do you have any thoughts on?
Because and I guess the point is you have, the difference is that outside you can literally feel the draft and the difference in the wind when you're behind somebody and whatnot. As you gain experience, when you're drafting because you feel it. Believe it or not, you're not probably feeling the difference in the power as much as you're feeling the difference in the wind resistance, knowing that you're there. And in most cases, in Zwift, it's the same thing. You really just can't feel the difference in the draft. It doesn't get easier as you get behind somebody. You generally just go faster, and that's the way to think about it. If you were doing 30 miles an hour in a pack in Zwift, right, and then you tried to do 30 miles an hour by yourself, you'll really quickly notice that you would have to put out a ton more power, and that's really where the difference is. But don't expect to get behind somebody and have it the resistance of the trainer necessarily let up. It doesn't work that way in the real world, believe it or not, unless you're holding the same speed and then somebody comes alongside you and you were to do that. That's the difference. You're really just going faster whenever you're drafting in Zwift, most likely. So you end up essentially just suffering the same but going a lot faster, right? And that's what drafting and racing is all about in a lot of ways, anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so
what about
something?
One other question would be and this is something that's very common. I get a question about sticky draft all the time, right? And people have a hard time, and they actually get caught off the back behind somebody as somebody else cracks, like they're doing a group ride on Zwift, and they're caught behind. If I'm caught behind you, for example, or you're caught behind me, and I start to crack, and I let a gap go, and you're behind me, you'll find that as much as you're kind of trying to pedal harder, you'll stay behind me in a way, and that's what we call sticky draft. Would you care to explain that, Hunter? It's important because this is where it does make a little bit of a difference to know this is a very game-specific thing. Yeah,
definitely a Zwift-specific thing in that you're when you're outside, that gap might be opening up, but you might be able to just simply pedal around that person. But with Zwift, the Zwift programming needs to have a threshold in order to say, okay, you're in the draft or you're not, and it's built so that you kind of stick in the draft. It might take a moment or two to get there, but then you stick there, and it's good because you're given a little bit of wiggle room, so to speak, and you're going to stay in that draft. But then if you, for whatever reason, need to come out of that draft, in the example Aiden's list, making reference to if there's a gap opening up, you might actually have to pedal a little bit harder to maybe to get unstuck, so that you're moving past that rider to get into the draft of somebody else. So that's a principle there. And then when you multiply that over 50 riders in a fast-moving pack, it takes a little bit of getting used to, for sure, because you might not actually be benefiting as much from the draft if you're constantly moving up in a pack as if you just simply stayed in one place in the pack. Because if you're moving up, you're always asking the Zwift program, all right, unstick me. I got to pedal harder, unstick, pedal harder, unstick, and as you move from draft to draft to draft up in a group. So just keep that in mind, and that's generally what people mean when they say sticky draft.
Yeah, and long story short is the point is just know that there's a certain level of stickiness when you get caught behind another rider. And game makes you stick to the draft just a bit. It's a nice feature when you're trying to draft, but if you're trying to move past the rider, it's really a disaster, right? And then it's especially noticeable at slower speeds, like you'll find on a climb, actually. So to beat the sticky draft, all you really need to do is increase your power significantly, kind of get out of saddle or accelerate by 100 watts or so that Zwift knows you don't want to draft anymore, and you'll move past the rider pretty quickly.
And something else, another important detail that we should always keep in mind if you're getting started using Zwift is if you coast, if you stop pedaling in Zwift, it's basically the same as putting your brakes on. If you're in a group and you stop pedaling, you very quickly become unstuck. And not only that, but you very quickly stop losing the benefit of the draft of the group that you're in. And it's a much more faster dropping from the group than if you were in a group in real life. In a group in real life, you're pedaling along. You're probably spending more time coasting in the pack than you are pedaling. In Zwift, it's almost the exact opposite. If you stop pedaling, you're going to find that you very, very quickly get dropped off. You get tailed off the back of that pack. So always remember, coasting equals brakes in Zwift. It's just something to keep in mind. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be pedaling hard, or you don't have to be pedaling as hard as the person next to you. But so long as you're pedaling and putting some power into the pedals, that coasting equals brakes will not apply to you. So definitely an important. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good point. And but in that same sense, doesn't mean you have to hammer like Hunter's saying. And I guess an important caveat here is that there's actually talking about that sticky draft, which this kind of ties into this a little bit. Know that there's actually a wattage range that will help you in the draft, right? So that is, if you're drafting behind someone who's pulling at 300 watts, you'll stay in the draft if you're doing 250, but you might also be able to stay in the draft if you're doing 225. So why put out the extra effort if you need to? And that's really important. So you always want to try to, that's the whole point, is to try to conserve energy. But remember, there's a wattage range, do that sticky draft. And while you don't want to coast, like Hunter's saying, it's really important to understand that you don't need to pedal play with it a little bit. Back it off and see if you still stay in that draft. If you're not losing places in a pack or whatever it might be, you'll be really surprised how big that range is. It makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, there's a big difference between coasting and putting out even moderate to low amounts of power, for sure. And then the last point I wanted to bring out here is you look at your avatar. Your avatar will ease up on the handlebars. Will actually your avatar will choke up a little bit and get higher on the bike when you are in the draft. When Zwift recognizes you as in the draft of another rider, you get up on the bars, and when you're not in the draft, you get down low on the bars, and you can actually see there's body language there. There's differences in the avatar, so that's definitely one caveat to that. Unless you're on the Zwift Tron bike with the glowing wheels, that's the only instance where your avatar is always in one position, draft or not. So just putting that caveat in there. But I personally look for that all the time. If I'm struggling, if I'm trying to hang on in a race, for dear life, I'm trying to make sure my avatar is up on top of the bars, so I know that without a doubt I'm benefiting from the draft. So
absolutely, 100%. And I guess I don't want to get too nuts, just in case people aren't even here yet, but as a tip for people that have already done this, and you might have seen this happen, there's also, just talking about kind of the dynamics of this in drafting, but also and this kind of ties in, is there's something called a super tuck, and you'll see actually people get way down on their bars, right? Or they actually do that classic super tuck like you've seen in the tour. So if you're on this actually happens due to a combination of things, but if you're on a long enough downhill section and you're finding that you can rest, this is actually a place where you can consider not pedaling. But there's a couple of things that need to factor in here. So if you're putting out less than 10 watts and you're on a decline that's 3% or more at 35 miles an hour or more, which you'll be surprised how often that happens, Zwift avatar will automatically go into the super tuck, right? And and you'll find that the person will accelerate a lot, and that's a huge thing to help you get a little bit of rest and actually get an opportunity to stop pedaling for a second. So it definitely makes a difference. Just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
And play with that if you can.
Yeah, I've seen it written where if you're in a super tuck, you're basically you're going to keep up with somebody pedaling downhill at 3.5 to 4.2 watts per kilogram. It's a lot. I mean, that person is pedaling really hard. I mean, it depends, of course, on the grade and the speed and all that, but the super tuck rider can definitely keep up in most situations with a pack that's pedaling.
It's the faster you're going, the more it helps you, right?
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. And then I guess one other important thing, because I think I saw Ben Wolf actually do this yesterday, or maybe on Saturday. I can't remember when I saw him. Anyways, we were doing this as like if you or actually it was on Sunday. If you super tuck, and the same thing happened to me, and you don't get out of the super tuck, you don't start pedaling, and you hit a flat section, or you slow down and the game sets you up. If you're not sitting in a group, you're in trouble. Right? So keep in mind, and this is a little bit advanced, but again, it's really key. It'll save you a huge learning curve. Know that there's a delay, a 3-second delay from the time you start pedaling to the time that the AMP+ signal gets picked up and actually transmitted to Zwift. So you need to stop. You need to start pedaling, or you need to. And honestly, this really helps when you go into a steep uphill and you need to make sure that you're accelerating at an appropriate time. You want to make sure that you start pedaling coming out of that super tuck with 3 seconds before you hit the flat section, if you can, right? Or before a sharp climb, you want to get outside and start kind of jamming on it. 3 seconds before your avatar even hits it, in a little bit in advance, because it's going to take that long for everything to react.
Yeah, it can't. And you have to allow yourself a few opportunities to get this wrong before you start to get it right. I can't tell you how many times I use the super tuck a lot in racing. And Aiden said, you'd be surprised how even on a short descent, if you time it correctly and if you anticipate it, and if you're watching your speed, if you're watching the angle, the gradient of the descent, I've nailed it sometimes where it's I stop pedaling and I go into a super tuck exactly when I need to, and I might only get 3 or 4 or 5 seconds, but that when you're really hammering, that makes all the difference in the world. But that has come at the expense of probably a handful of times where I totally botched it and just dropped myself completely because I was relying on the super tuck too much at that moment, and I didn't quite get the timing correctly. So practice it, play with it, and if you get it wrong a few times, that's okay. Just realize that this is a skill, a Zwift skill, and a tool that you're learning to use, because once you get it, it'll come in really handy. And then, so erg mode. Aiden, when do you use erg mode?
During endurance rides, when I'm trying to watch a show and not paying attention.
Okay. Yep. And so erg mode, in case anybody is not aware, erg mode is when the smart trainer puts you at a specific wattage and keeps you there. Whether it's if you're doing a structured workout, or if you've just created a workout for yourself, or if you're doing a workout, it'll take you through the progression of a workout, just putting that resistance at the trainer at that set number, and just keep you there so long as your pedaling is steady. And generally, what I recommend is the shorter the interval, the less you should or could rely on erg mode. So what Aiden is saying, and I'm the same for longer rides where I'm just looking to go at easier wattage, or maybe like a 20-minute long threshold or sub-threshold interval. Erg mode is great for those instances. For shorter duration intervals, or maybe sprint work, or 30-second, 30-30 intervals where you're picking it up for a short amount of time, probably don't need to rely on erg mode so much, and it might actually get in the way a little bit, because it takes time. The trainer, depending on the trainer that you have, it takes time to lock you into that specific wattage. And so a couple main points here with erg mode is, so like I already talked about, consider keeping erg mode turned off for the shorter efforts. Number 2 is, don't shift when you use erg mode. You just simply don't need to shift. Just keep it in one gear and keep your pedaling steady. If you need to change cadences, that's fine. You can change your cadence steadily. Don't shift. Change your cadence over the course of even 10 seconds it might take. But you have to give the smart trainer a chance to let erg mode do its thing. Oftentimes, too many times I've heard of people getting really frustrated with erg mode, but meanwhile, come to find out they're shifting. And every time you shift, you're adding time to what the trainer needs lock you in to the right wattage. So no shifting. And then if you happen to get stuck where I'm sure many of you out here have experienced this, where you perhaps have to stop pedaling, erg mode is still turned on, then you try to start again, and it's almost like the trainer is locked. It's not going anywhere. The best thing you could do in that instance, when you're using Zwift, say if you're doing a structured workout, just stop pedaling for, I think it's 5 seconds. Zwift will turn erg mode off. Then you can get going without that trainer being locked up feeling. That's so frustrating. It's not supposed to work that way, so don't try to make it work that way. Just have erg mode turn off. It'll say it on the screen, erg mode temporarily off. You pedal, you pedal, you get going again. Once Zwift sees that you're pedaling steadily, it'll prompt you erg mode reactivating, and then once your cadence is up, then you'll get hit with that resistance at the appropriate level. So those are the 3 main points for erg mode. Aiden, what about when you're working with athletes on this? Is there anything else?
Sorry, can you say that again, Hunter? I had Hudson, my son, my 3-year-old son, coming in and asking me questions. Say that again.
I was just saying, are there any other erg mode tricks that you or tips, best use practices?
Erg mode is great, and there's a lot to that. Like, it's a kind of a bigger subject in sense of I don't know if you have any slides on that, but if there's you can actually import for those people here that are CCNS athletes. You can actually take your Training Peaks account and connect it to Zwift using the connection settings in your browser. And if you do that, you could actually have all of your workouts, because we build out most of your workouts in erg mode, automatically import to Zwift from Training Peaks, and actually have all of your workouts in erg mode, function in erg mode for you. You don't have to build them yourself. You don't have to do anything like that. Like to get an erg workout going, you can actually have it all automatically imported, which is great. You just have to make sure that you have your FTP set appropriately. You'll be able to see what your FTP settings are in Training Peaks by clicking on your account and looking at your zones. But that would be my big tip. Like, it can save you a lot of time in terms of not having to write down and remember what your workout is. And for those longer steady state intervals, like Hunter said, it'd be a great way to sort of make sure you hold accountable to hitting the wattages and don't forget anything while you're at it, which is great.
Yep. One more thing I wanted to bring out here was, if you're using erg mode, don't be afraid to turn it on and off. I've fired up my Zwift here. As you're using Zwift, if you mouse over the bottom of the screen and you get your blue bar here, Aiden, you're seeing the options bar here. Mm-hmm. So when you're using erg mode, if you need to turn it on and off, there'll be a button somewhere on this side. Obviously, I'm not doing a workout, so the button's not here, but you can just temporarily pause or turn erg mode on and off. Like, for instance, a lot of times, if I want to warm up at a lower or higher wattage than erg mode is keeping me in, I'll just simply turn off erg mode. But then when I'm getting close to my work interval, I'll make sure I turn it back on, and then erg mode is working again. So don't be afraid to turn it on and off in order to better utilize it for when it really makes sense. The last point here we want to talk about is trainer difficulty, and how does trainer difficulty work. And when we were, as coaches, when we were talking about this, we all kind of had our own interpretation of what it means when it's totally off or totally on. And basically what this means is, when your trainer difficulty is set to max, and I'll use the extremes to make the point. If you're on a 15% grade in Zwift and your trainer difficulty is set to max, the smart trainer will be told to make it feel 100% like a 15-degree grade. So the resistance at the trainer will be very, very hard. You'll probably have to shift into a very easy gear, and you'll probably still have to spin you'll still be probably clobbering the pedals to put out the wattage. if you turn that trainer difficulty all the way off, it's almost as if that it is really, that 15% grade becomes much, much, much less. I don't know the exact number, but maybe it feels like a 2 or 3% grade, in that you'll be able to use a more typical gear on that climb, but you still have to do the wattage to climb up that grade. Aiden, any thoughts on that?
I would say an example would be just where we have plenty of people that have like a second bike or like a bike with a certain limited gear set, but that's not capable of going up like a 20% grade, like on the Zwift or something like that. And you don't need to switch out your cassette for it, right? You just need to make sure that you adjust the trainer difficulty down a certain percentage to make sure that you don't run out of gear, right? So that you can keep your cadence up. You're gonna have to put out the wattage to go just as fast. So it's not gonna make it easier for you to go faster. It's just gonna make it the respective grade less or the resistance less. But you still got to put out the power. So I don't think you're getting out of any work.
Yep. And so, and Aiden, what do you have it set to typically?
100%, man. Come on. No, actually, I believe it or not, like today I did an Innsbruck ring race, and because I also have a kicker climb, which I'd highly recommend. Sometimes it gets unstable when it gets above 10%, and when I'm really railing on it, I'll on a race situation where I might be hitting really steep grades, and I'm concerned about it being like a little bit of lack of stability, I'll back it off to like 60, 65%. But I think that most people's default is actually at 50% of the trainer difficulty. That's where it's defaulting. So keep that in mind. Like you might go in there, you might be surprised. If you want the true full resistance of like a climb for full realism, turn it all the way up. Absolutely go for it.
Yep. Yeah, and just to clarify, add to what Aiden's saying there, the kicker climb, which is that thing that brings your front wheel up and down based on the climb that you're on, that responds as well to the trainer difficulty setting. So if set to max on a 15% grade, the kicker climb is going to take you to 15%. If it's set lower, it only goes up a few degrees, as if it was like a 3 or 4 or 5% climb. So the climb works in the same way. And I would basically agree with that. I generally, for racing, I always have it set to max unless there's a very steep climb. And incidentally, sometimes for racing, and if there's a steep climb, sometimes I won't even use the kicker climb. I'll just leave it turned off, just simply because, like Aiden said, it can get a little unstable when it goes up that high, and I just want to be able to focus on smashing the pedals and going hard. I don't need it to simulate the climb. So a lot of times I'll either leave the kicker climb off, or I will bring that trainer difficulty down if there is a pretty steep climb, even for training too. And sometimes you just don't need to feel like you're going up some of these major pitches. So I think we covered all of that pretty well. If you have any questions about this, pop them in the chat box, because we're basically
fire away, folks.
Basically getting to the end of our hour here. I mean, we're talking about if anybody has any questions about connecting Training Peaks, Strava, or any of the other third-party apps that Zwift can connect to, that type them in. I can go back to the Zwift game here, I can actually go to Zwift.com and show you how I could make these connections.
Yeah, if anybody has specific questions while we have a little bit of time left, absolutely fire away. I mean, this is the fun stuff, and we can talk about that, and we will, unless people have questions. But we want to make sure we allow to answer any specific technical inquiries that people have.
I mean, I as far as you're looking at these achievements. I mean, this was actually taken from my. I think this is. I grabbed this graphic from my own account. So, but honestly, I don't really keep track of these achievements. I know that some people really like to go after them, but I don't particularly keep track of what level I am. Getting up to certain levels is great because it unlocks certain bikes that you can obtain, and wheel sets. Like like level 10, for instance, you get access to Zip 808s, and those are great because those are like one of the fastest things you can upgrade in order to be competitive in the group rides and the races.
Yeah, and I would definitely recommend spend the quote unquote drops that you earn by riding, because and look up, like if you go to ZwiftInsider.com, like you can look up what the fastest wheels for your level are, so you can kind of quote unquote save up for them, or the fastest frames. All that stuff makes a difference. Wheels and frames for your bikes make a difference. Aero helmets do not, so we don't want to see anybody wearing tri helmets while they're riding on the road. All right. Like not in a triathlon or aero bike setup, but besides that, totally fine. Like absolutely go to town, customize your avatar, get the Schwakey bike. It does make a difference, both in weight and aerodynamics.
Yep. And actually, Aiden, I just noticed you've been using the Tron bike. You finally broke down
all in, baby. Yeah. In order to earn the Tron bike, you have to actually you have to click on that achieve. Like there's actually a challenge section. Hunter, maybe you can show them how to do it. It's actually not super intuitive via your app or your program there. Like if you open up Zwift, you can actually select challenges that you want to go for, and you have to choose the Everesting challenge. And from there, if you choose the Everesting, here you go, Hunter's doing it now. Not badges, but close that.
Oh, okay, yeah. Can you get it through here?
It does. Click on the blue big icon with the bike there, like that gives you your challenge status. The blue box.
Oh, okay.
Yep, there you go. That's what we're talking about. Actually, Hunter, you can select a new challenge. Go right ahead. Click on the selected different challenge.
Holy cow! Look at that! Look at that! My icon's going all the way. Holy!
It gives you a progress report in terms of how far you are. But he just finished that Everesting challenge, as you can tell. It was tracking how much elevation.
I didn't even realize this. All right, people. All right, everybody. What should I pick here? I had learned something new every day here. So I have no idea. So I climbed Everest. Okay.
Yeah. And if you, I think you need to ride the entire length of Italy, buddy. At least you would have done that for a while now.
Should we leave it?
But you have to climb Mount Everest, to be clear, multiple times in order to get the Tron bike. It's the only way to do it. You can't buy it. You can only earn it through the Everesting challenge. And it took me an entire winter of riding pretty consistently on Zwift. So just keep that in mind. But Italy, man, Italy or nothing. Okay.
All right. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna click that. Click OK. All right. So I guess there you go.
You're in. I don't know what you earned other than bragging points, but that's half the fun. So.
Okay.
But yeah, like we said, any other questions? Anybody else?
Yeah, we got a few minutes here. So
spend some drops there, Hunty. Show them how to spend some drops in the garage while you're at it. Make it rain. You have 3 million of them, right? So
I think I've
got my garage. You can choose like what you already own, but this in the shop is where you can buy your stuff. You buy your swag.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not really into.
All the cool kids are riding Cannondales nowadays, Hunter.
I think I've got a Cannondale. I think I bought a Cannondale somewhere. Oh, maybe I did. No, maybe I didn't. All right. Okay. Cool. So I'm gonna get the Evo then. Right?
Oh, what about the System 6?
Oh, the System 6. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll do that. Sure. Buy it.
Yeah, look at that. See, like the stars rating there is like a way for you to see how fast the relative bike is. Like so the more stars, the more aero, or the lighter it is. And
this has got disc brakes. I don't want to be somebody with that.
We just peer pressured Hunter into spending like 500,000 drops. Look at that.
I'm easy.
Anything
else? Anything else on this screen while we got Zwift open here? I mean, I think, yeah, okay. I guess we can go down a rabbit hole with some of this stuff.
You can have a whole different clinic on that stuff for sure.
Yeah.
But, all right.
Actually,
well, I think yeah. What? Go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing that one thing that I didn't realize, that I just learned a couple days ago, actually, that in Zwift you can mouse over these dots, and you can see, you can like pull up prior information by hitting these dots.
On your route, yeah, totally, absolutely.
Yeah, I had no idea. Didn't even know that. So
look at that. If we didn't say we were going to go over the interface or display at all, over deliver.
Yeah, and we just did.
But that's it. This is a great starting point. Hopefully, that means that everybody coming out of this clinic should have complete ability to connect and ride on Zwift at a basic level. Now, which we think is the next step in your sort of development, actually, is to do the 201 clinic. If like you guys have this basic stuff down, you should absolutely come join us for our 201 clinic. Most of your clients, it's free for you guys. We're going to talk about communicating via Zwift in a couple different ways, which is what honestly makes it all like so much more fun. Like it's the only reason why Zwift is successful is because of the social aspect. So we'll help make sure you guys know how to direct message. That way, when you'll have no excuse when we direct message you, but you'll have to write back or continue to ignore us like most people do. But I think in most cases, if you can join us for that communication clinic, you'll learn how to use the Zwift companion app. You'll learn how to use Discord, and you'll learn how to follow people. So that's absolutely critical.